From Adams Morgan to Anacostia Park, we all want safer neighborhoods. But what does real safety mean? Real safety means preventing crime before it happens. By having police work with communities to disrupt cycles of violence, by supporting families with stable housing, and providing more mental health and drug treatment. We know that adding more police and locking up more people doesn't make us safer. Real safety means investing in the things that help prevent crime. Learn more at RealSafetyDC.
Hello, and welcome to It's a Fandom Thing. I'm your host, Erin Marlowe, and each week I'm joined by a panel of guests to discuss all things fandom and pop culture, primarily from a female perspective. You'll find everything from fanfic, to cosplay, to Schitt's Creek, to Supernatural, and everything in between. So put on your favorite piece of fandom merch, set aside that fanfic that you're writing about your OTP, and sit back and enjoy this week's episode. Hello, and welcome to this special interview episode of It's a Fandom Thing. I recently sat down with costume designer Kristen Kopp and production designer Christian W. Snell to discuss their work on the new thriller, Violent Ends. Violent Ends is an atmospheric period revenge thriller set in rural Arkansas. You're going to first hear my conversation with Christian Kopp, and then you will hear my conversation with Christian W. Snell. So thank you so much. I'm very honored to be sitting down with costume designer Kristen Kopp to discuss her work on the new thriller that's set in 1992 Arkansas, Violent Ends. So hi, Kristen.
Hi, Erin. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, thanks.
But you were handpicked, though. I know you were handpicked by the production designer, Christian W. Snell. Is that correct?
Christian and I have worked together on 2 other features. Yes.
Okay.
We have a working relationship for sure. Good collaboration between the 2 of us.
And for those who aren't aware of that relationship between the production designer and the costume designer, how does that relationship work and why is it so important that you have a good working relationship?
I mean, it's nice to have. It doesn't always happen, but when you do, you can just kind of like enrich the look of the film, I feel, because we work together on character choices. So when we're looking at a certain location or someone's room, the choices that we make inform one another. And then we kind of touch base about color palette and just character development within those spaces and with the clothes.
Awesome. And this one, of course, is a period piece, which it still makes me go, oh my gosh, the 90s is a period piece now. But this is set in 1992 and in a specific location in Arkansas. And I think because when people hear the 90s, they might instantly think of a certain look, but this has a very specific look and feel to it. So what was the research involved in the costume design for this?
I mean, I think as with this story, it has kind of like a timeless feel. The first time I read the script, I told JM, I was like, we could do this anywhere, anytime, because it's such a solid story. But obviously his heart is from Arkansas, and this is very rooted in Arkansas. And so, of course, we started with kind of like this blue collar feel for Lucas, and that kind of spread throughout his family. But then we also wanted to elevate it and elevate kind of the Shakespeare qualities of it. And so that's kind of where we got into the dark and the light and kind of playing with these obvious colors. But I think they work. They, kind of like just sets apart like Sid from Lucas. And then it ends up kind of like mixing together at the end.
Yeah. And speaking of that, because I did want to ask you, Sid's costume design, like the first time we see Sid and he puts on those boots that are like so distinct and he's wearing black, whereas, as you said, when we see Lucas, he's usually in like white. So then that was a very, very distinct choice, right? And were the boots definitely part of that then?
Yes. I mean, those boots were in the script, and Sid is kind of like the dark cowboy, and I just went full on with that. It was so much fun, and just like really, even just with his silhouette, making it like a strong, slim silhouette, and just pretty much going with dark and black for him. And yeah, the boots it kind of gives him that gravitas when he walks and like gives him that little swing and sway in his hips. So yeah, that was really important for his character.
Yeah, they really, really stuck out to me. It was like one of the first notes that I made, like in the beginning, when you first see him about that character, were those boots. And it seemed to add even more height to him. And I don't know if that was part of it too, to make him a little bit more imposing.
I mean, I don't know if the height, but definitely when a man puts on a cowboy boot, they kind of like sway in a bit. They aren't used to when they're wearing their sneakers around. So it kind of gave him a little bit of swagger, I think. And it's an interesting thing that's kind of like rooted in Arkansas as well, just going back to the story, because Arkansas is in this kind of middle of the country, and there is a little bit of the cowboy feel. You know, you're pulling away from the East Coast into like a little bit of the West cowboy and Manifest Destiny thing. So it was kind of fun to play with some of those old archetypes with him.
Yeah, that's true. And I think when we think of crime stories or anything like that, I think people automatically think like East Coast or New York or something like that. Whereas this is very much that, farmland feel to it. And was that like a different thing for you? Had you ever worked in any kind of genre like that?
I mean, yeah, I did a story in Louisiana. I think it's just really important to like root the characters in the story. And so that's why, like making Lucas feel really blue collar and kind of like just a really accessible person and kind of like everyday clothes was really important. I think Sid's character lent to kind of elevating that a little bit. But yeah, I think just making them feel real, like they were, like you could look at a snapshot or a photograph from that time and it would feel like them, just in their ripped jeans and t-shirts kind of thing.
Yeah, and the ripped jeans, I do want to say, really did stick out to me for some reason, because I think it gave it that, and I don't mean this is like an insult to the characters at all, but it gave this like almost like, not dirty isn't the right word, but you could almost like smell the fear or smell like the growing anger or desperation as it went. I don't know if that played a part at all in...
I mean, a little bit. And for me, that was really rooted in the 90s. Like in the 90s, jeans didn't have stretch in them yet. And so like you bought your jeans and you wore them to like get the rip in the knee. It was a thing, like a kind of pride, that you like wore your jeans enough like that. And it was kind of, it's real, but it's lending maybe a little more to like the grunge thing a little bit too. Lucas isn't exactly grunge, but it was very of the time for me, like having the ripped wide leg jeans, Levi's. Yeah.
That is true. Yeah. And sometimes you even bought them when they were already ripped.
Now you do. Now
That's
you
true.
can
That's
go
true.
and buy all this free. But at the time, it wasn't, it was like you had to earn that. You had to earn that rip in your jeans.
That is pretty true. Yeah. Yeah. Because that is one thing I want to praise you for is with the costumes, it's never like, I think sometimes you can watch things that are taking place that are like period pieces and it sticks out. Like it's kind of like, it doesn't feel natural, or it feels kind of like this would be a cool thing to put here to just wink, wink, nod, nod, nudge, nudge. And it didn't really feel like that. So I want to praise you for that everything felt very realistic.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Because I never want to detract from the story and the acting, so I just want to be part of the world rather than grabbing your attention. So thank you. I appreciate that.
You're welcome. And then I wanted to know, because I'm not going to give any spoilers away, but there are some moments where there is blood involved. And it struck me that like some of the shots when you would see the blood on the clothing were very, like, when you said Shakespeare, it kind of reminded me of that, where it was very profound. And so I don't know if costume design played into that at all when they were planning like that.
Yeah, I mean, blood is interesting because it ends up being very much a collaborative conversation, with Billy and Sarah, who was taking care of him, the costumer. They'll be on set and with JM, and it'll end up being like, where does this bullet come from? It's just like this conversation that happens in the moment a lot. we prep for it, but a lot of times you kind of want to do that in sequence and see how it evolves. And we were able to do that for the most part in this. And Billy was really vocal in like where he thought blood would be and like how he wanted it. But with his colors, it did kind of add to this graphic quality that was really nice. Yeah.
Yeah, very much so. It was like kind of like this, I don't know, kind of like purity in a way of him. I know there's morally ambiguousness to all these characters, but there's a more pureness to him. And then having that kind of, I don't know, on that pure white or on, it was very striking to me. So that really, really, yeah, it was nice though. It was good. It was really well done, I think. Yeah. And then I wanted to know with the women in here, of course, the mom, she's a cop, so that's a little bit different. But I noticed for some of the female characters in here, like there were brighter colors and some flower designs. Was that just because of the 90s or did you purposely do that?
I mean, the 90s are great for that. It's like allowed me to have some color. So that was really nice because it was so dark. And with men, it's kind of hard to like push some of that color. So it was just nice having like the time period that could lend to that. Yeah, with the flowers. And it just gave kind of a nice foil between Tuck and his wife, kind of like gave this softness of like the masculine and the feminine.
Yeah, yeah. And with Tuck, going to the character of Tuck, I thought it was, and this is very much 90s too, but I thought it was interesting putting him in there where he had like it was like almost the sweatshirt, with the jacket, with the hood. And for his character, and I don't know if this went into it, he felt like a character that was kind of always on the edge and didn't have very high self-esteem, didn't like himself, and was kind of hiding away. Was that part of the reason you chose that, or did that play into it at all?
Yeah, I mean, Nick is such a fabulous actor, too.
Yeah, he's so good.
Anything, and he would make it like, he would embody it.
Yeah.
He's incredible. But yeah, I mean, just like he had this kind of like, like that kind of skatiness about him. So yeah, there's a little bit of like he answers the door with the blanket and just kind of always cloaking himself in a way. So yeah, it definitely lent to his character, hopefully subtly, but yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it was definitely a subtle little touch, but you really could notice it when he would be with Lucas, and it was like kind of this, like they matched, but at the same time there was that little tiny bit of contradiction there, which kind of gave the fact that he was kind of always, I think, looking up to Lucas or following Lucas's lead. So it really, really lent itself well to the character. And yeah, Nick Stahl he's incredible. So he's so good.
You could put him in anything and you just be like, the actors they were all like so lovely to work with and collaborative, but also just so talented, it's like, could put him in anything.
And I know this is an independent film, and so you had a little bit of a leaner budget. Was that restrictive at all, or how does that help you in your process?
I mean, it's definitely restrictive, but it's okay. I mean, sometimes it's kind of fun. Like you problem solve in different ways, when you're working with a really large crew and really large budget. So I had 2 people in my crew who were incredible and really helped me get through the whole process. And then, yeah, you just get really resourceful, and you don't waste as much when you don't have as big a budget. So it's good. Like your choices you put a little more importance on each of your choices. And yeah, but it's an okay problem to have. It kind of sometimes leads to things that you wouldn't expect.
Yeah, I can see that. Especially when you said the wasteful, you won't have anything that goes to waste or anything.
Yeah, you're just more mindful about like your choices and what you're spending money on. And so, yeah, sometimes it can get you into a pickle, but for the most part, I mean, when you work on these smaller films, everyone's everyone's understanding that we're all, problem solving in different ways. So.
Yeah. And everyone's there for the love of the art and the love of the film and project.
And honestly, being in Arkansas was great for it because one, they had so many incredible resources and thrift stores for these vintage clothes. There's just a lot of collectors there. And so being there was probably easier in a way to like get through the budget I had and dress everyone than say if we were in LA or something like that. And it would have been a lot more difficult for sure. So
yeah, I was going to ask you that. So you answered my next question there. Yeah, because I'm sure being on location, I would think would help everybody. In some ways, there might be some restrictions to it, but it gives it more of an authenticity too.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's like I'm finding these 90s clothes that were actually in Arkansas. So, it could have been on these characters in some way or another.
Yeah. I just still can't get over the vintage. The 90s being vintage is just like...
I know. I know. Wild.
I know. It's like, no, that's not true. Vintage would be the 50s. What are you talking about? But I guess it is true now. Yeah. And I was wondering, what did you learn, as much as you feel comfortable sharing, about yourself as an artist and personally through making this project?
I think just really to trust the people you're working with, especially in film and filmmaking. It's like the more you like give your trust to them as well, you just come up with a beautiful product. It's like, it's true that all of like the energies together make something great. And this was such a nice team to work with, everyone from production all through the actors. And so, yeah, I think that just trusting the people who are around you. Yeah.
I love that. I love that answer. And then, I don't know if you can, but do you have a favorite outfit?
Emma's stuff. So she was so fun to dress. You can't really see, but she has these overalls when she's on the lake that I loved. I love her sweater and jeans at the track. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of her stuff I love. And then Billy had this great jean jacket that it's like just a regular jean jacket, but like the cuts were so specifically 90s, and I just love. Yeah, I don't know. There's a few little pieces, little gems in there.
Yeah.
And the boots, cowboy boots.
Yeah, those boots were...
Yeah. Once I got the metal pieces put on, I was like, that's it.
Yeah, it was those metal pieces really, really like stuck the landing there, because you knew everything about that character without him even speaking a word. So, yeah. Well, thank you so much, Kristen, and really great job working with these vintage clothing. I just still can't get over that, but no, really great job getting it down, and really it added so much to the tension and the atmosphere, and really great job. So thank you so much for speaking with me.
Oh, thank you so much.
Today, I am very excited to be talking with production designer Christian W. Snell. Christian, hi, first of all.
Hello.
Thank you so much for joining me. And I'm wondering, how did you come about to be part of this project?
Through a friend of mine who's a producer, Simon Hatt. I had helped him on a short film, and he works with James Gunn and does a bunch of things. Anyway, I think Vincent, one of the producers on this, knows him, and he said, hey, we're looking for a production designer for this film. And he was kind enough to pass along my name. And, it was a lower budget. But as soon as I saw the script, I met everybody involved. I was really excited. I was quite excited to just be a part of it, because it's an unusual story. It's not what's typically told. It's thrilling. It's early 90s, Arkansas, gritty, which is all things I really like to recreate.
Yeah. And speaking of that, since it is early 90s, which it still makes me go, oh my gosh, that's like a period piece now.
Yeah, right.
I mean, that just makes me feel so old. But setting it in the 90s, what was the research involved in that, especially since you're in a specific place? You're in Arkansas, so.
Well, there was a bit of a conversation about possibly not doing it, period. And I was like, no, please, we can pull this off. And we did it. And I was so excited. I was born in 80. So for me, I lived through that, but I lived through it in Ohio. But it's very interesting. Even when we live through something, you have to dig into the research, because your memories can be dishonest. And the way you picture something isn't necessarily the way it was in reality, especially for a lot of different people in their bubbles of the US. So we just dug into newspapers, local articles, that sort of thing, and just get a taste for. And I had experienced a bit of that type of culture, which is kind of hillbilly culture, we'll say, in the early 90s. You imagine some of these folks have a still in their backyard in the holler of Tennessee. It's very similar. It's very segregated, and I don't know, it's an interesting time. People had hardline phones. There's no connection. There's no internet. There's people lived the culture that they lived, and they weren't ashamed of it, and they didn't ever see other cultures like city culture or thing like that. So there was no feeling of isolation. It just was what it was. So to kind of give these people flavor and it was a lot of fun. Yeah. I mean, I think Kristen, who I know you already talked to, the costume designer, she did a great job. Just kind of made people feel, back then it was almost 10 years behind, and now we live in a world where you see what everybody's wearing and what they're doing. Back then, subgroups, especially rural America, almost felt like as if their hairstyles and their clothing was at least 5 years before, was cool 5 years earlier, but they're still doing it because they don't care. And that's what they know and they saw. And it took a minute to get there versus like the cities are much more advanced and progressive with that kind of things. So it's the same thing with the houses. I took them to look like the 70s, 70s and 80s, because I knew a lot of people in the 80s and early 90s that still hadn't updated their houses. Why would they? They just did it 10 years earlier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really, really stuck out to me. The design of all the different houses, and some of them felt, like you've got Tuck's house, which felt more homey kind of and more like a family home. And then you had other homes that felt more like not dilapidated, but kind of ignored.
Yes.
So did you do that specifically for like where the characters were in life?
Yes, absolutely. Tuck's house was just kind of a white farmhouse. And so we went in there and put wallpaper in the hallways. I got my decorator Chase did an amazing job, and we found just fun stuff and put, floral patterns on the beds, and we wallpapered the kitchen with a 2-tone wallpaper and put a border in there. And then brought a lot of vintage appliances, and really we're intentional with the color palette. The kitchen, we wanted to kind of feel like it was her space, Tuck's wife. So we made it, pastels and things like that, which would have been very appropriate for, like they had just updated it for, the late 80s, early 90s. And the hallway felt like, let me get some 70s wallpaper. Like they hadn't got to that yet, but it was the 70s floral pattern, but heavy, but gave us some texture, and then put some lighting there. And then the bedroom, just put some floral bedding in there, just to kind of, again, apply lots of layers of texture. We put a lot of things out in the backyard. I had to put a 3-wheeler in there, and just things that I know would be normal for, the early 90s that people were riding around. So he's out there in that scene splitting the wood. That was a lot of fun for me. And then the front porch, we just put a bunch of junk out there, kind of made the house feel a little bit more collector, hoarder-ish. An old camper I parked in the front yard. Just, again, make it interesting. Like add some layers to these characters. Like this house is probably passed down for generations. And, that's a lot of the story is generations of family. So it's like they got this from somebody in the family along the line, and, then they put their own touch to it. As far as the drug house goes, that one, I didn't actually have to do a lot to that house. It was already kind of just that. An older couple owned it, and they hadn't done much updating to it. And we went in and just added a few things here and there, cleaned it up a bit. And, it had the right feel of kind of just some guys that don't care.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think when people are watching movies, I think sometimes they don't notice all the work that goes into everything behind the scenes with the production and everything, production design especially. And it adds so much to the characters.
Oh,
just those houses and the locations and everything added so much, like the scrapyard. That really, yeah.
So we looked all over. Originally in the script, it was a mill, like a wood mill.
Oh.
And the one original mill we had, it was okay. It would have worked well, but they backed out. And I was like, well, does this have to be? I went to John Michael, who, by the way, amazing. One of my favorite directors of all time. He's so decisive, just pleasant to work with, just a lovely guy. We had to pivot. And I said, well, does it have to be this? Like, what if it's like, it just has to be a place that you believe they'd have a stash of money.
Yeah.
And I was like, a scrapyard would have that. And I thought that added a lot of interesting character. And so there was a lot in Northeast Arkansas. There's a lot of Northwest Arkansas. I mean, there's a lot of old scrapyards. So I was kind of just I just got in my car and started driving around knocking on doors. And I was like, I got to find one that has just a ton of old cars that really hasn't changed. It's been passed down from a father to his son. and all the old cars are still sitting out there. And I found this guy, and I went in the lot, and I was like, oh, this is going to work. He still had cars from the 80s sitting in the bays. And like there was cars in there, but I looked behind this layer of a few newer cars. I'm like, we can remove all these newer cars. We've got a time capsule scrapyard. And we did. And he couldn't be nicer. And he went in there and took his tow truck and started shifting all these newer cars, sticking them in the back of the lot, and gave us this pathway of all these cars that were right and were older. And then we put some older cars in the bays, and I was like, we got it. And we bought off the marketplace a couple older vehicles, like that van. And I was like, this is our scene. And because we didn't have two pennies to rub together. So it was like, how do we find some guy who's going to be down to let us do this? So that was a lot of fun for me to be able to bring that to life into the story.
Yeah, I bet it was. And it works so well, especially with, I don't want to spoil a lot, but especially with the scene that happens there, the very pivotal scene that changes sort of everything. Yeah. And I did want to know, and I'm not going to spoil what it's for, but it really, really hit me. There is a funeral.
Yeah.
And I noticed the color blue, really stuck out to me. Was there a reason that was chosen? Was that chosen on purpose?
Oh, yeah. That's why we carried that into her bedroom. We carried it into the kitchen at Tuck's house. Lots of times I'll let a palette kind of evolve when I come to doing a film. And I'll see, especially on a low budget like this, I kind of have to work with what locations have and things like that because I'm limited to what I can change. And for warmth, blue in this one kind of ended up being the good colors, and they kind of represented her. And so, yeah, and we had blue there at the funeral. We had blue in her bedroom, in the kitchen, any place that was like, oh, this is good. This represents her. And the truck was blue.
Yeah,
found that truck, and that was blue. And so we said, well, let's kind of stick to that. And then everything else for the guys, like the other side of the family, the pawn shop, the gun shop, reds, yellows, some violet. Like if you think about his bar, like you go into his secret bar behind the pawn shop.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, much more kind of deep colors, angering colors.
Yeah, because another thing that stuck out to me, speaking of the gun shop and the pawn shop and everything, is that red phone on the wall. And then like there is a scene that involves blood on the white wall right next to the red phone. And it was just so striking to me and so when you're working with blood, because there's blood in this, are you also designing what the walls are going to look like that the blood would be on? Yeah.
That phone we put there intentionally. And we picked the red phone intentionally. And that pawn shop was a real gun shop. It was crazy. You can go shoot in a real gun shop, and they didn't care. And I was like, I just need all these guns to have existed before 92. But yeah, we put a fake wall there that we could blast blood against. And then we put the phone there. And then we kind of redecorated around the room, just rearranged some things, put like some period calendars and some old TVs and things like that in there. Yeah, that was a fun one.
Yeah.
The bar is a real bar. It's a different location, and we sistered them together through that curtain. You go through a curtain, you show up at the bar, but it was a different location. But the bar we added a bunch of neon, kind of really made that moody, the pool light. Mm-hmm. We spent about a day in there adding a bunch of taxidermy and just giving it a little bit more grit and darkness.
Yeah. Yeah. And it really, really works well. And also along with the costuming and everything like that, it's a great mixture.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I'm wondering, do you have, this might be hard for you to pick, but do you have like maybe some prop you found, something you found, or a location that was your favorite?
This is like weird, but we didn't have much money for picture cars. And so one of my favorite things was that Bronco, the police Bronco, the Bronco 2. I'd found some pictures of old police cars from the 80s, and that popped up as one of them. I'm like, let's just go find one of these and put a light bar on top and make it. And, on a bigger picture, even on bigger pictures, I'll try it. I love picture cars. So I really like kind of designing my own picture cars. So this was a lot of fun to kind of find those cars and find this Bronco. And we painted it and put the light bar on it to make it like for her, for the mom, something just a little bit different than your typical police cruiser you see in a movie, especially a period piece. I think that was one of my favorite things to do. One of my favorite locations was definitely, the cabin. The cabin was one of my favorite to decorate, hands down. That is a real state park cabin that was just empty. They rent them out. They used to rent them out. Now the cabin's been shut. That whole camp has been shut down for years. And they let us go in there And we were able to just decorate that whole thing for that whole end of the movie scene where the glass gets blown out and all that. And it was so fun to just go through and kind of figure out the choreography of that place and then dress it accordingly and just make it feel like this family's had this cabin for generations. They've just passed it on and they've just kind of kept it. So, we've got a lot of layers of old books and just stuff that's been in there, but they haven't really done anything to it since the 60s, like it was Tuck's dad's, or his grandparents at some point, and that was a lot of fun for me, that place.
And I think the production design and everything adds to it where it feels like it adds this layer of desperation for some of the characters involved, especially Lucas, I think. But there is this added layer of desperation with the production design there too. So really hats off for that, because that's pretty incredible to add that layer there. You could feel it just with the locations.
Yeah. And that place, it had this feeling of kind of isolation. It felt vulnerable. It didn't feel like their home, like by any means. And that was intentional to just make it feel like, oh, they're in this place. And sure, the family's had it for years, but it's normally a happy place. And to know that it was going to get shot to pieces was going to hurt a little bit. But he didn't care at that point. So in a place, it was just a beautiful location. You could walk around the back and you're on this lake. We had the boat there. It was really easy to put all that together. And a lot of it just existed. So, hats off to the producing and directing team for finding they found a lot of those locations. I switched out with them, a few of them, just because, like I said, like the original scrapyard, that wasn't a thing. And I'm like, how do we make this more interesting? So that was a good one. Oh, the racetrack was a lot of fun too. Those guys still race those stock cars from the 80s.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So we just brought in a bunch of period cars and put some string lights and kind of gave it this vibe and, dressed a bunch of people and put in the stands. But they still race those cars from that they've been racing for 30 years. So fun to recreate that scene too.
Yeah. Yeah, I bet. And, it was a lean budget. It's an independent film. And I know that, you've talked a little bit about some of the challenges, but is there also something rewarding about that, working on a film like that?
Oh, yeah. I've worked on films where I have a crew of 50 people. This one, I had a crew of me plus, I think, 4. And it's scrappy, but you have to find locations that work, that are 75% of the way there. And so it's a hunt. It's a hunt for finding locations that are mostly there, that also can fit in your tight little schedule, so you're not jumping all over the place. Keep finding interesting locations that are all close together, that don't require a ton of work and a ton of money, that fit the story and fit the vibe. And like the cabin, they had already found before I got there because they'd done some scouting trips. Normally, I'll be involved early on finding these locations. They'd already found a lot of them, and I just have to make them work. Like that White House, Tuck's house, had these big air conditioning units on the porch, like modern air conditioning units. That I was like, you have to hide these, which is part of the reason I'm like, okay, let's hang an American flag. Let's just put a bunch of junk out here, and nobody will be the wiser, And then these mini split units were inside the house too. So I'm like, okay, let's build some boxes over at wallpaper and nobody will be the wiser. So yeah, there's a lot of that when it's you plus 4 people, you're kind of trying to delegate and stay ahead of the schedule and just doing what you can with the time frame you have to maximize it. But you do get lucky with something like that church. We have to put the casket in there and dress it, but it looks almost beautiful the way it is. Even the bar, that's the scrapyard. So I was like, how can we get mostly there with these locations that we can find to really bring life to these characters? It's fun. I honestly enjoy it. It's easy to go in, just have a big team and design out a bunch of sets and draw up a bunch of stuff and build it on a soundstage. But there's I don't know, you can really find some, this is my litmus test whenever I walk into a place. Is this better than I would design out of my head and build on a stage? And I have to walk in every way. And I'm like, okay, how do I make this better? Like say I walk into a bedroom, like, is this better than what I could have designed myself with the budget I have? Then it's like, okay, this is a no-brainer. Let's do it. And that's the same thing I did with like the scrapyard. It was, okay, we had a mill before. How do I make that better? Well, what's interesting? Scrapyards from this period which are interesting visually and cinematic. Have a bunch of guys pulling up an old van. Like, that's interesting, right? It's the same thing with her police car. It's like, how do I make what you'd expect to see and then make it more interesting, but still be believable for her character who doesn't really like wearing uniforms. She's been in the force for years. She's a little bit of a rebel. So like, let's put her in a 4-wheel drive. She kind of cruises around these backcountry roads of Alabama or in Arkansas.
Yeah, and I would think that there's also, I think, a part to it, which, of course, every film, people are have a lot of passion and stuff like that. But I think there's something with independent film where there's a different layer of passion because they know, like, the work is going to be not necessarily harder, but like you said, you're not going to have the biggest crew. You're going to have a limited budget. You're going to have to be very creative.
Yeah. It's harder, but it can be really rewarding when you have really understanding producers and directors that are experienced.
Yeah.
It can be hard when you're dealing with first-time directors, first-time producers. Then it can be really hard because if they don't understand what it takes, that can be difficult. But when you're dealing with pros like what we had on this, they understand. It's like, okay, this is gonna be a lot of work, but let's really do the best you can.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I'd already worked with my crew before, which helped. So they understood me and I understood them, and I knew what they were capable of. I'd done a movie called The Blind, which is about Phil Robertson, and we shot that in northern Shreveport, Louisiana, a year earlier. And that was that was a little bit bigger of a film, but it was still equally hard. And I had the same decorator. I kind of promoted my assistant decorator became my decorator, and then I had a lead man who was my lead man on that. So my prop master was the same. So we all kind of had a shorthand with each other, and that made it a lot easier.
Yeah, I bet. And then lastly, I'm just wondering, what did you learn about yourself as like an artist or a creator from making this?
I think the big lesson is, I heard from this old designer I used to work with years ago. He said, give me $5 or give me $20,000 and I'll make sure it's not tacky. And that's a lesson I've continued to apply. No matter what the budget is, make sure it's not tacky. Make sure it's done right. Make sure it's beautiful. Don't compromise. Don't ever compromise. There's always a way to either shift the story point, look at what the story needs to be told. And if you can't afford what you need to build for that scene, figure out a way to build something that looks great for that scene. Don't compromise.
I love that. And definitely wasn't tacky. So mission accomplished.
That's the goal. So, and it's like, you know what you're signing up for. Again, with Kristen, it's like, okay, well, we'll make sure it's correct. We'll make sure it's period. And then with a period piece, I just make sure that I'm not, whatever I do, I make sure it's correct. It's correct for the period, So
yeah.
That's the big goal. Make sure there's nothing in there that's going to pop the audience out, like a new car drive by in a scene. I think they got frustrated because I'd be like, don't let a single bogey pop into this. It will take people out of the picture. And they were pretty good about that. Like, I was like, they would take the car and just go off and drive. I'm like, I would tell the DP, I'm like, make sure you're close, rack focus, so nobody can tell what that car is driving by.
Yeah. Well, I didn't notice anything. So great job. Yeah. And thank you again, Kristen, for speaking with me. I really enjoyed talking with you. I always love hearing about the process because it takes a village to make any movie. So thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you for the time, and thank you for all the great questions.
Thank you again to Kristen Kopp and Christian W. Snell for sitting down with me to talk about their amazing work in the new thriller Violent Ends. Violent Ends is in select theaters right now. Keep a lookout for it and go check it out when it comes near you or when it becomes available on streaming. For links to all our past episodes, including our catalog of interviews, please head on over to our website. It's afandomthingpod.com. And there you will also find links to all our social media. We have a Discord server. Everything you can possibly imagine, you will find there. So until next time, remember, it's a fandom thing. And please go support independent cinema. Everyone is always wanting to find unique things to watch, different things to watch, things that aren't the same thing that you see all the time. And you will find a lot of that with independent film. So go support them. Thanks for listening. Take care of yourself.